The first sign that something was wrong came when the singing stopped. On Etherios, the crystalline beings who called themselves the Etherians had sung for 3,000 years a harmonic frequency that resonated through their translucent bodies and kept their world in perfect balance. But as Kira pressed her palm against the great resonant spire in the center of New Lumina City, she heard only silence. "The harmony is broken," whispered Elder Zephyr, his once brilliant blue form now dulled to gray. Around them, other Etherians moved like ghosts through streets that had lost their glow. The plague they called the Gray Death had arrived on their world just 7 cycles ago, and already half the population had fallen into the colorless sleep from which none awakened. Kira's younger brother Prism had been among the first to fade. She'd watched helplessly as his rainbow-bright essence gradually dimmed, his crystalline structure becoming cloudy and dull. The medical synthesizers that had cured every ailment in Etherian history were useless against this new horror. "We must evacuate," Elder Zephyr continued, his voice barely audible. "The refugee ships are gathering at the Nexus Medical Station. Perhaps the other races have found answers we cannot." The evacuation was chaos. Etherians, who had known only peace and order, scrambled aboard transport vessels alongside dozens of other species fleeing the plague's advance. Kira found herself crammed into a cargo hold with Vorthan traders, their scales dulled by fear, and Quillan refugees. Their normally iridescent feathers turned ash-gray dot as their ship approached the Nexus Medical Station. Kira pressed her face to the viewport. The station was nothing like the elegant spires of her homeworld. It was a massive, sprawling complex of interconnected modules, like a metal city growing chaotically in the void. Ships of every size and design docked at its countless ports, bringing more refugees every hour. The station's interior was even more jarring. Unlike the serene, ordered spaces of Etherian architecture, the Nexus was a maze of corridors filled with the desperate babble of 100 languages. Medical bays overflowed with the sick and dying, while researchers from across the galaxy worked frantically in laboratories that hummed with alien technology. In one such lab, Dr. Maya Okafor paused in her examination of plague samples to watch the latest group of refugees shuffle past her observation window. The human microbiologist had been studying the Gray Death for months, and the pattern was always the same. The more advanced and pure a species' biology, the faster they succumbed. Maya rubbed her eyes, exhausted. Her glucose monitor chimed, softly reminding her to check her blood sugar. She'd been so focused on finding a cure that she'd nearly forgotten to manage her own condition. As she pricked her finger and watched the small drop of blood disappear into the testing strip, a thought began to form in the back of her mind. Perhaps the answer wasn't in perfection. Perhaps it was an imperfection itself. Dr. Maya Okafor's laboratory looked like a battlefield. Specimen containers lined every surface, each one containing samples from a different species ravaged by the Gray Death. Holographic displays showed the plague's progression through various biological systems, and every single one told the same story. Complete cellular breakdown within days. Double quotes Dr. Okafor. The voice was barely a whisper, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Maya turned to see an Etherian standing in her doorway, her crystalline form flickering weakly. "I am Kira. I was. Told you might need a volunteer." Maya's heart sank. The young alien was clearly in the plague's advanced stages. Her once brilliant body had faded to a sickly gray, and fracture lines were beginning to appear along her limbs. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure there's anything I can do. Every treatment we've tried has failed." "Then perhaps it's time to try something different." Kira stepped closer, her voice growing stronger despite her failing body. "I've been listening to the other researchers. They all speak of fighting the plague, of overwhelming it with superior technology. But what if that's exactly what it wants?" Maya frowned, intrigued despite herself. What do you mean? The plague doesn't attack randomly. It targets the most advanced species first, those with the purest biology, the most efficient systems. My people had eliminated disease entirely through genetic perfection. The Vorthans had nano-healers that could repair any damage. The Quillans had evolved beyond physical weakness entirely. Kira's eyes, still retaining a faint sparkle of their former brilliance, met Maya's. But humans ... Humans are different. Different? How? You're the only species here that hasn't fallen to the plague. Your people have been exposed for months, yet you remain healthy. Why? Maya was quiet for a long moment, considering. It was true. While every other species had succumbed within days or weeks, humans seemed remarkably resistant. She'd assumed it was because they were more primitive, less evolved. But what if ... were not pure? Maya said slowly. Human biology is messy, chaotic. We live in symbiosis with billions of microorganisms. Our immune systems are constantly adapting, fighting, negotiating. We're not perfect, we're complicated. Kira nodded, though the movement seemed to drain her remaining energy. The plague feeds on perfection. It cannot process complexity, contradiction, imperfection. Your species has something mine lost long ago, beautiful, chaotic, imperfect life. Maya's mind raced. Her own diabetes, which she'd always seen as a weakness, was actually a perfect example of what Kira described. Her body was in constant negotiation with beneficial bacteria, synthetic insulin, and carefully balanced chemistry. It wasn't perfect. It was adapted. I have an idea, Maya said, her voice growing urgent. It's completely untested, possibly dangerous, and goes against everything we know about medicine. But if you're willing to trust me... Kira smiled, her form flickering like a dying star. Doctor, I'm already dying. What do we have to lose? Maya's hands trembled as she prepared the most unconventional treatment in galactic medical history. In her laboratory, Kira lay on a biobed, her crystalline form barely retaining any color. The fracture lines had spread across her entire body, and her vital signs were failing. Are you certain about this? Asked Dr. Thane, the Andromedan head of the medical station. His elongated skull showed the worry lines that his species developed under extreme stress. Introducing foreign bacteria into an Etherian system is unprecedented. So is this plague? Maya replied, drawing a sample of her own blood. Every conventional treatment has failed because we're fighting the plague on its own terms. We need to change the game entirely. She'd spent the last 6 hours preparing the most complex bacterial cocktail in human history. Not just her own gut bacteria, but samples from dozens of human volunteers, each person's unique microbiome contributing something different to the mixture. The result was a chaotic soup of life that represented everything the Gray Death couldn't process. The theory is sound, admitted Dr. Vex, a Centauran biochemist whose 4 arms allowed him to monitor multiple instruments simultaneously. The plague attacks pure biological systems by draining their life force. But if we introduce controlled chaos ... it won't know what to attack, Maya finished. She looked down at Kira, whose breathing had become barely perceptible. We're out of time. Beginning the procedure now. The injection was unlike anything in the medical texts. Instead of fighting the plague directly, Maya was introducing billions of microscopic allies, bacteria that had evolved alongside humans. For millennia, learning to coexist, compete, and cooperate in an endless dance of biological complexity. At first, nothing happened. Kira's vital signs continued to plummet, and the fracture lines spread further across her crystalline skin. The assembled medical team watched in tense silence as minutes ticked by. Then, something extraordinary began to occur. A faint shimmer of color appeared along one of the fracture lines, not the pure, single-frequency light typical of Etherians. but a complex rainbow of biological activity. The shimmer spread slowly, like liquid light flowing through crystal channels. "Her cellular structure is changing," Dr. Vex reported, his voice filled with wonder. "The bacteria aren't just surviving in her system, they're integrating with her crystalline matrix." Kira's breathing deepened, and her eyes fluttered open. The gray pallor was fading, replaced by something new, a prismatic glow that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of countless microscopic lives. "I can feel them," she whispered, her voice stronger than it had been in days. "So many tiny voices, each one different, each one alive. They're not fighting the plague, they're confusing it completely." Maya smiled, tears streaming down her face. "How do you feel?" Kira sat up slowly, marveling at her transformed body. She was no longer a perfect Etherian, but something new, a hybrid of crystal and carbon, order and chaos, perfection and beautiful imperfection. "I feel ... alive," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "More alive than I've ever been." The news of Kira's recovery spread through the Nexus Medical Station like wildfire. Within hours, her room was surrounded by desperate families, government officials, and researchers from across the galaxy. But Maya insisted on keeping the crowd at bay while she monitored Kira's condition. "The integration is remarkable," Dr. Vex reported, studying the readings from his bioscanners. "Her crystalline structure has become a living ecosystem. The bacteria aren't just surviving, they're thriving, creating a defensive network that the plague cannot penetrate." Kira herself was still adjusting to her transformation. Her body now pulsed with complex patterns of light, each rhythm corresponding to different bacterial colonies within her system. She could feel their tiny lives like background music, a constant symphony of biological activity. "There's something else," she said, examining her hands. "I can sense the plague now. It's not just a disease, it's almost like a living entity, but one that only understands simplicity. When it encounters the bacterial symphony in my system, it becomes confused, paralyzed." Maya nodded, taking notes. The plague was designed to drain pure life force. But what we've created isn't pure, it's collaborative. The bacteria and your crystalline matrix are working together, creating something the plague has never encountered. There. Conversation was interrupted by urgent alarms throughout the station. Emergency broadcasts crackled over the communication system. Code red. Plague outbreak in Sector 7. All medical personnel report immediately. Maya and Kira rushed to the affected area, where they found chaos. A transport ship carrying Vorthan. Refugees had just docked, and the plague was spreading rapidly through the new arrivals. The medical team was overwhelmed, watching helplessly as beings fell into the gray sleep one by one. "We need to replicate the treatment," Maya said, but Dr. Thane shook his head. "We don't have enough bacterial cultures. It would take weeks to grow sufficient quantities, and we don't have weeks." Kira stepped forward, her hybrid form glowing brighter in the dim emergency lighting. "You don't need to grow them," she said quietly. "I can share them." "What do you mean?" "I can feel the bacteria adapting, evolving, preparing to spread. They want to help. It's what they do. They've been doing it for millions of years on Earth, jumping between hosts, sharing genetic information, creating communities of life." As if to demonstrate, Kira breathed out slowly, and tiny spores of light drifted from her breath. Where they touched the air, the atmosphere seemed to shimmer with microscopic activity. "The treatment is alive," Maya realized. "It's not just a cure, it's a relationship. The bacteria want to spread, to find new hosts, to create more communities of imperfect life." Within hours, the spores had spread throughout the affected sector. The dying Vorthans began to show signs of recovery, their scales taking on new patterns of color. The plague retreated, unable to process the growing complexity of bacterial-enhanced life. But this was only the beginning. Reports were coming in. From across the galaxy, the Gray Death was advancing on dozens of worlds, and traditional medicine was failing everywhere. They had found the cure, but could they spread it fast enough to save the galaxy? 3 months after Kira's transformation, the galaxy had changed forever. The cure, now called the symbiosis solution, had spread to over 100 worlds, but not in the way anyone had expected. Maya stood in the observation deck of the Nexus medical station, watching as ships from across the galaxy arrived not as refugees, but as pilgrims. The station had become a hub of biological cooperation, where species came to learn the art of imperfect living. "The irony is beautiful," Kira said, joining her at the viewport. Her crystalline form had continued to evolve, now displaying patterns that shifted like living art. For millennia, every species sought biological perfection. We eliminated disease, weakness, chaos. We thought we were evolving, but we were actually making ourselves vulnerable. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Many beings struggled with the concept of intentionally introducing flaws into their systems. The proud Centaurians had initially rejected the treatment, viewing it as biological contamination. The logical Andromedans had argued that chaos was inefficient, but the plague had been a harsh teacher. As world after world fell to the Gray Death, even the most prideful species began to understand perfection was a dead end. Life required mésalliances, contradiction, and the beautiful dance of competition and cooperation that only imperfection could provide. "Dr. Okafor," came a voice from behind them. They turned to see Ambassador Keth, a Quillan whose feathers now shimmered with bacterial colonies that created mesmerizing patterns. "The Galactic Council has reached a decision. The symbiosis solution will be officially adopted as the standard treatment for the Gray Death. More importantly, we're establishing the Institute for Biological Diversity on 17 worlds." Maya smiled. The Institute was her idea research. Centers dedicated to studying not just the cure, but the philosophy behind it. How could different species learn to embrace beneficial chaos? How could they cultivate the kind of biological complexity that would protect them from future threats? "There's something else," Keth continued. "The plague seems to be retreating. Our deep space monitoring stations report that it's actually withdrawing from several sectors. It's as if it realizes it can no longer feed on the galaxy's life force." Kira nodded thoughtfully. It was never truly evil, just hungry. It fed on pure life because that's all it knew how to process. But now that life is becoming complicated, diverse, imperfect, it has nothing to eat. As if summoned by their conversation, a young human child ran past the observation window, chasing a ball in the station's recreation area. Her laughter echoed through the corridor, and Maya couldn't help but smile. The child represented everything. The cure had taught them that life was not meant to be perfect, but to be lived fully, chaotically, beautifully. "My diabetes saved the galaxy," Maya said with wonder. "Who would have thought?" Kira placed a crystalline hand on her shoulder, its surface warm with bacterial activity. "You taught us that strength comes not from perfection, but from adaptation, not from purity, but from community. The galaxy is learning to live imperfectly, and that imperfection is making us stronger than we ever imagined." Outside the viewport, the stars shone with new light, not the cold perfection of distant suns, but the warm, chaotic, beautiful glow of a galaxy learning to embrace its flaws.